Hello, I'm Chrissy Hejny, and this is my presentation on demonstrating how my copyright lesson aligns with the Assure model. Brief overview of my lesson. It'll begin with a teacher-centered interactive presentation. The students will take notes and ask questions. I will periodically check for understanding. The next segment is student pairs will be given scenarios involving questionable copyright use, and their task is to deliberate and take action on those scenarios. What should they do? Would they be violating copyright law, etc.? They'll be able to ask questions and share their answers. Activity 3, those pairs will then create their own scenarios to potentially pose to teachers and peers to test their knowledge of copyright rules. They'll be able to use any medium they like to do this. And finally, at the end, there will be an exit ticket, which is a multiple choice quiz reviewing material from the lesson and teacher feedback questions. The Assure model has 6 elements: analyze learners, state standards and objectives, select strategies and resources, utilize resources, require learner participation, and evaluate and revise. Number 1, analyzing learners. This 11th grade reading class is made up of 20 students aged 16 and 17. They're all enrolled in on-level English 3, and they've all passed their English 1 and 2 EOC tests. 5 of the 20 receive special education services, and 10 receive 504 services. 7 of those 20 students, according to their IEP or 504 paperwork, they require a hard copy of notes. So students have been provided with a printed copy of the presentation with notes. There will be a launch work instructions on my welcome slide, and that will be a short set of questions that are derived from a lesson that I gave them at the beginning of the year on academic integrity. Oops. There's a little bit of everything for everyone in this lesson. There's, as I said earlier when I did an overview of the lesson, there's something for every type of learner. There's interaction with media and technology, there's interaction with teachers and peers, and there's individual work that they'll be doing as well. Number 2, state standards and objectives. Standards and objectives were stated up front in the initial presentation, of course. Students should be able to compare and contrast copyright, fair use, public domain, etc., explain and demonstrate the ethical use of resources, and examine the consequences of plagiarism. I'll also post objectives on the board so that they can be seen throughout the period, and of course they'll be on my welcome slide as well. 11th grade reading students will define and explain 4 key copyright terms. They will determine the correct course of action in a minimum of 5 out of 6 scenarios in which copyright rules are in question. These objectives can all be evaluated through each of the methods used to ensure learning. I will be observing them during the lecture and as they work through the rest of their 3 remaining activities. They'll be giving me oral responses, they'll be working together throughout those scenario activities, and then of course they'll be taking a quiz at the end. Number 3, select strategies and resources. The lesson begins with a teacher-centered presentation. Then we move on to a student-centered activity, and that's involving pairs, and they're going through those predetermined scenarios in which copyright rules are in question. Those resources are created by me. And then the student-centered activity that follows that is when the kids create their own scenarios, and they can use any medium to do this. They can write it on paper, they can film themselves acting out the scenario, they can post it as a question on any social media platform. Number 4, utilize resources. The classroom is arranged differently today. The desks are usually in 5 groups of 4. Today they're going to be in 10 pairs. As they come in, they'll take a card from me, and they'll be instructed to find the friend whose card partners best with their card. So for instance, if a kid draws a macaroni card, they need to go find the student with the cheese card. Someone who draws the jelly card might go find the peanut butter card, etc. Instructions for their launch work is on the welcome slide, and the students are given hard copies of notes up front. The launch work, again, as I mentioned earlier, that is the pre-assessment quiz that they will take to see whether they remember the lesson from the academic integrity policy lesson at the beginning of the year. The scenarios have already been printed out and cut for distribution, and written instructions will be in the slideshow that I flip through over the course of the period. So they will be getting verbal and written instructions for the duration. The exit ticket quiz that they'll be taking in Blend is scheduled to become available 15 minutes before the goodbye bell. Number 5, require learner participation. Students will be engaged with each other by having to find their partner that they'll be working with. They'll be required to interact with me and the notes and the presentation during the lesson. They'll be interacting with each other and me during the scenario practice. They'll be interacting with each other and their choice of media to create their own scenarios. And then, of course, with Blend to complete their exit ticket quiz. They'll have the opportunity to practice these skills and get immediate feedback from their partner and from me while they are deliberating those scenarios. And they'll be able to use research and media literacy skills to check those copyright rules for the scenarios that they're going to be required to make. Number 6, evaluate and revise. Students are going to be required to demonstrate their knowledge through participation in the lesson. They're going to deliberate and act on those copyright scenarios. They're going to create their own scenarios and pass an exit ticket quiz. The final question on the exit ticket helps me. It's a teacher feedback request that asks students to write down one thing that resonated with them and 2 suggestions to make the lesson more engaging. And then, of course, if necessary, the next lesson will be based on the results of these evaluations. Some students might show the need for a reteach. Maybe I need to pull them in for flexible instructional time. Perhaps the whole class says, you know, this was fun and engaging, but I need more practice. I need more real-world scenarios or something like that. And finally, this is my rubric. I have 3 pieces here: the scenario responses, the student-created scenarios, and their exit ticket. It's worth 80 points total. The student-created scenarios, I weighed that a little bit more heavily because they are going to have to do a little bit of research and use these terms and these rules in order to create kind of real life, potential real life scenarios in which copyright rules are in question. So I weighed that one a little bit heavier. The scenario responses will be written. The students, they'll be interacting with me and each other as they go through them, but the pairs will end up having to write down their rationale for their decision and their actual final answer. And then, of course, the exit ticket. If they got most of the answers correct and completed the teacher evaluation, they get full points for that, and so on and so forth. Thank you so much for viewing my presentations. I hope you enjoyed them. Have a great day.